As somebody who has never desired to be anybody's wife, I get asked all of the time what I think about marriage and specifically what the real power terms and conditions are that I think that women should be thinking about if they want to enter marriage, which is a system of power. So this is one of the things I've talked about a lot, right? Marriage is a system of power. It is an institution. Okay, it is governed primarily by the law in the country that you live in. And regardless of how you feel, whether you love someone, you feel that they love you, maybe you are getting married because of love and romance, the system is still the system. In fact, the system, the legal system of marriage operates and prevails within a patriarchal society and in a society where misogyny is rampant. Okay, and so actually, although I talk about things from the lens of what I believe is modern single womanhood and female autonomy, of course, I have talked about marriage as a system of power. And I'm going to just share what I think the real power terms and conditions are. Because here's my thing, and I have said this before when I've gone live before, and this question comes up over and over again. Many of the women in particular in our community, a lot of them are, still desirous of partnership with a man, marriage, and children. Now, here's the thing that I always say, okay? If you are overly concerned and consumed with the ring, with the wedding, the photo shoots, documenting your marriage on social media, documenting your engagement on social media, the proposal, which these days is a performance, okay? Even the algorithm rewards wedding content, proposal content, engagement content. It is some of the most popular content there is that you can produce online. You can go from being a complete nobody as a woman. The minute you announce that you are engaged online, you can amass thousands, hundreds of thousands of followers. Okay. You can also, if you want to these days, monetize that process. Okay. And so it is now a whole industry unto itself. Right. And so I believe as an observer, as somebody who does not desire to enter into the system of marriage, that you have to understand that part of this is a distraction, but it's also dysregulating. I've written about this on the Substack in quite some detail, how a lot of dating and wedding content is actually dysregulating for your nervous system. And the obsession with these things keeps women, particularly women who are desirous of it, or women who are grieving not being a part of it. Maybe you haven't met a partner, maybe you're single because of circumstances. It's dysregulating. And it can also be a distraction because a lot of the time, women are very focused on the performance part of romance, dating, and marriages. They are not focused enough on, one, identifying the real power terms and conditions of a marriage. Okay, and then negotiating, because ultimately it is a system of power. And if you as a woman want to retain some personal power and leverage, you need to understand that you need to negotiate. And that negotiation requires you to have very transparent and specific conversations with the man that you are marrying. Okay, it is important. That part is important. And I'm a realist. I am a pragmatist. And like I say, most of the women in the community, if I'm very honest, do desire marriage. And so, look, I'm going to tell you what I think the 4 areas in terms of real power terms and conditions. And like I say, you have to be mindful, because what I will say about this as well is that the most misogynistic of men, and notice I'm saying misogynistic men, and look, I believe that misogyny exists in us all. It is a poison. It is in the air. Okay, even women, all genders are conditioned and programmed to be misogynist. You may not think that's the case, but most women have to unlearn misogyny when they learn. Remember, we talk on this channel about invisible contracts. Okay? And so misogyny exists. It's not if, when, it's to what extent, and how does it show up in this system, in this person. Okay? So we need to be realistic here. Your love, your romance, it means nothing to the system. The system will operate as it does, regardless. Right, the system will operate as it does regardless. There's been many a woman who has been in love and thought, I trust him. I trust myself. I do not need to worry and think about whatever this thing is. And then when you choose to separate for whatever reason, whether it was you or him that initiated it, etc., the system will step in. The law in the country that you live in, okay, will have laws that dictates how your marriage is dissolved. All right. So kidding yourself by thinking to yourself, I'm only going to think about love. It's all about trust. That is a folly. And getting married is an adult decision. And I always talk about women functioning psychologically and financially like adults. Marriage is an adult decision. It is a legal decision in many places in the world. So this isn't something that you play with. And quite frankly, the system is not on your side. The system will function like the system. And that is why you need to understand what the real power terms and conditions are if you are entering into a system of power like marriage. So here are the 4, I would say, power terms and conditions that one needs to make sure that they have thoroughly reviewed and assessed and discussed with whoever it is that you're about to marry. Now, I'm not a relationship expert. I am not a divorce lawyer. I'm not a dating expert. I don't give dating advice. What I'm telling you is that marriage is a system of power. And as somebody whose work is really focused on the invisible contracts that systems of power impose on women, right? The invisible contracts that we as women inherit in order, and we're expected to comply with, we're expected to obey, so that we supposedly are going to be protected, that we will belong, that we will be accepted, and in the case of marriage, that we will be chosen by a man, because that really is the ultimate goal. That is the ultimate goal. And isn't it funny that we live in a day and age where there are more and more women who are proposing to their partners, and that causes an uproar? Part of that is that invisible contract that you as the woman should be chosen. And really, when you propose to a man, you are indicating that you are choosing him. Right. So here are the 4 areas. Let's just get into it. Okay. The 4 major areas: body, money, labor, authority. Now, I appreciate that many of you may or may not be religious. And so actually, religion has a lot to answer to when it comes to marriage, but and the way marriage impacts women specifically. And I know there'll always be people in the comments that say that people distort the Holy Bible and the Quran, depending on what religion you come from, especially from the Abrahamic religions. But when we talk about invisible contracts, always remember we're talking about the gap between what you are taught and what the lived reality is. The gap between what you are taught and what the lived reality is. And we who function and think psychologically like adults, we do not buy into fairy tales. We show up like adults and we have the conversation. So these are the top 4 areas: body, money, labor, and authority. Now, of course, for you, there'll be lots of other things because everyone's personality is different. Everyone's likes and dislikes are different. But the things that I'm about to mention really are conversations you should have regardless. They should be in the mix, because what you should be trying to understand are what the real power terms and conditions are and will be. What are you going to agree upon in your marriage? Here we go. The first one is bodily autonomy. We live in a world that actually believes that women really don't have a right to bodily autonomy, and that actually gets worse when you get married. Funny that. There are people, as I say, some of whom who will use holy texts to support this twisted view that a woman is meant to be ever sexually available to her husband. Okay, and so when we talk about bodily autonomy, we're talking about sexual access and expectations. You need to be discussing that, because you need to ascertain whether you are indeed on the same page about your utility and your bodily availability in that marriage. What are the expectations and how do you feel about those? Okay, like I say, there are people who hold very strong beliefs that women should have sex when they don't want to because they are a wife. They should have sex maybe when they're not feeling well because they are a wife. They should have sex when they're tired because they are a wife. They should have sex as quickly as possible after giving birth to a child because they are a wife. Now, I'll add in here because sometimes this does make me chuckle, but it's a dark kind of irony and humor here, is that in any other context, when you're not a wife, people will tell you that you shouldn't have had sex with someone because you felt pressured to, and that you shouldn't have had sex with them even though you didn't want to. People will actually disbelieve you should you say that you were pressured to have sex even though you didn't want to. But yet and still, when you become a wife, oh, now people will tell you that, well, of course you should have sex when you don't want to. So clearly it's possible. But the difference is if you're a wife, now it's okay. Right? So bodily autonomy, sexual access and expectations is something that you should be discussing off the rip, because you need to ascertain, okay, because this is about power ultimately, and who has authority over your body if it's not you? And you may be told that it's God that has the authority, and the scriptures will be rolled out so that, as I say, at any point in time, you should be ever available. You want to be talking about reproductive decisions. Reproductive coercion is a real thing, but equally what we see again, big invisible contract around reproduction and pregnancy, is that women are expected to take the brunt of the burden when it comes to contraception. I've talked about this before, but quite often women are the ones who live with the day-to-day side effects of various types of contraception because it is easier and feels better for their male partner. And so he's able to enjoy you, he's able to enjoy your body for his own release, but he doesn't have to have any of the downsides of contraception. And there are women who have very, very significant, symptoms that arise because of their contraception and the choice in contraception that they're making. And ultimately, a lot of the time it is because it is easier and their partner refuses to use any barrier methods of contraception. Now, bear in mind that it's your pH balance. Yes, indeed. Your pH balance is your day-to-day comfort as well. But equally as well, there's also your fertility to think about. So it's really important that you have that conversation. But again, you have some authority in deciding what contraception you choose or don't choose to use. And you are well within your rights to prioritize your comfort, your pleasure. Because after all, apparently, the sex should be mutually pleasurable. Just sit with that. So it's really important that you talk about contraception and do not, shrink in the conversation so that you end up using a form of contraception that actually doesn't work for you. It doesn't work for you in your body and may even reduce your experience, your sensory experience, your libido, your drive, all of those things. Okay, these are the real power terms and conditions. You also want to think about financial power. So that's bodily autonomy. Now we're talking about financial power. Okay, income. Okay, wealth accumulation. What does that look like for either of you? How do you envision building wealth, if at all? Spending authority. Okay, how are you going to manage that? How are you going to deal with that? Financial dependence versus financial interdependence and independence, because those are three different things. What are your views? How are you going to tackle that? How are you going to manage that? Asset ownership, okay? Retirement and security. These are the things that you should be talking about. And really what you want to get to the heart of is who controls resources and who bears financial risk. Very important. A few months back, there was a young woman who turned up on TikTok who said that she sold a property that she owned. She owned in her name. She sold that property and gave the proceeds of that sale to her boyfriend. So somebody she was not married to. She gave the proceeds to him and he bought a property and did not put her name on the deeds. And when she came on to the World Wide Web and shared this and revealed this, she was apparently shocked to hear that everybody else thought she was crazy. And then she did some follow-up videos where the boyfriend said that he didn't know that her name was not on it. No, no, no. We function like psychological adults. Psychologically, we operate like adults. Your name should be on things, and your name should be on things that you have financially contributed to. It is not good enough for someone to say, I did not know. No. Show up for yourself in these conversations. Prenuptial agreements, for example. If you've got a bike, you might have a scooter, prenup it. Do not get bamboozled into believing that when you talk about prenups, you're talking about the end of your marriage. No, what you're talking about is the terms and conditions. What you are really having a conversation about is power and leverage. And so if you can kid yourself into thinking that if we don't talk about this, things will turn out well, no, because the system is the system. The system will function like a system regardless of how you feel. The love, the romance, the system's going to be the system. Okay, it's really important that these are the real conversations that you are indeed having. The next bucket is the decision-making and authority. Now, if you're religious, you may well believe, especially if you come from an Abrahamic religion, that the man is the head of the household and that the wife is to be submissive. So you need to have very real conversations about what submission means. Now, remember, we're always thinking about the gap between what is taught and what the lived reality is. Okay, so it's very important that you have very clear conversations about what submission means to this head of your household if you come from an Abrahamic religion. Get very clear on what his vision of submission is. And if I could just add something in here, because I have talked about submission before many times. Who is he submitting to? If this is a supposed man of God, he should be submitting, because those holy texts do not put him at the top as if he is your God. So you need to observe evidence that he is submitting to a higher deity. Okay, and you should see evidence of that in his lifestyle, his habits, his practices, and the way he treats you now. You really need to have this as a serious conversation as a woman, because marriage is a system of power. Okay, and so you need to understand where your power is, if at all. Okay. Do with that what you will. So household decisions, career decisions, relocation, lifestyle choices, time allocation, real power terms and condition conversations. Might feel boring to you, but you know what? It gets very exciting when you have a dysregulated nervous system. You've got sleepless nights, you're under stress, you're distressed because something happens and these weren't the things that you discussed because you were so focused on the ring. You were focused on the engagement photo shoots. You were focused on the bachelorette party. You were focused on having 3 different outfit changes at your wedding. Okay? You need to stay focused on the real power, terms, and conditions. And here is the reality. The men who are the most misogynistic, they know that a lot of the time, women are not focused on the real power, terms, and conditions. No. They're focused on the performative elements. And you know what? Some of them may have the means and the resources to play the game. And so they'll watch you get consumed in the performative vanity metrics because they know once you're married, it's a different game. So you must be focused. You must be focused. Okay, whose preferences become the default preferences? That's what you need to understand. Okay, the next bucket, childbearing responsibility. So this is an interesting one because we're living in an age now where more than ever, women are talking about the emotional labor, childcare, domestic chores, and the pressure that puts them under. If you are a working woman, for example, this is a heavy load because unless you have conversations about what he envisions parenthood looks like for him, you will be carrying it all. It is very important that you ascertain how his schedule, his lifestyle will be adapting. That's the question. How? Not if, How? And get him to tell you that. And if you meet a man who already has children, you can tell a lot by the way he is parenting those existing children as to how he might parent the ones that you have with him. See, a lot of women again get distracted because we're in a society where it's okay and good enough for a man to pick up his kids once a month. And so you think that's good parenting. Or you assume that because you're living in the same home, he will do more. You need to be asking these questions. Physical childcare. Okay, educational oversight for said child, scheduling, the sacrifice of time and opportunity, hobbies and activities. I saw a post on Instagram literally just a week ago, and there were men who were talking about how their lives had changed since they became fathers. All of them said not very much, but they could all list the multiple ways their wives' lives had changed, fundamentally changed. Okay, so childbearing responsibility is important. If you are planning on having children, you need to understand who will become primarily responsible for producing and maintaining that next generation, the offspring. Okay, and that loops back to talking about finances, because for women, your career will take a hit, your financial trajectory will take a hit. And we do also live in a day and age where now stay-at-home mums are happy to be as poor or poorer than they were when they were single, to stay at home in the formative, those kind of infancy years. Okay, we saw a single stay-at-home mum the other day. They've got a family of 9 and they only have $160 to spend on groceries. These are the real conversations to be had, okay? The next one is domestic labor. Cleaning, cooking, household administration, planning, social coordination, care work. Who keeps the household functioning? How will that be split, if at all? You need to be asking these questions. You need to get to the bottom of what his vision is. This isn't anti-men. Remember, this is a system of power, whether you like it or not. And so therefore, you need to ascertain whether or not you are indeed going to be adopting the household responsibilities. Are they going to be split? If so, how? And what you'll find is when these things are not discussed, assumptions are made. And we live in a society that believes that women should be the ones who communicate. And so it will be on you to teach him how to do the laundry if he's never done it before. I saw a Christian wife recently saying that some men have never had to do certain things before. So when they're asked for the first time, you will need to be patient, even though apparently you've married an adult. I was watching a couples therapy episode, you know, that show that's on Amazon Prime. And there was a couple a few series back whereby the male partner said he didn't know how to clean the bathroom. He's in his 30s and he is a father. Okay, one needs to be asking these kinds of questions before you get married. And it's something that needs to be hashed out very clearly so you can ascertain whether or not the person you're marrying already functions like an adult. Okay, the next ones are around freedom and mobility. Okay, your ability to leave, your ability to travel, your ability to pursue opportunities, your ability to change direction, and your ability to take risks. So will marriage increase or decrease your freedom? Now, that's an open question. Many people have different views around freedom and marriage. It's one of the reasons why I don't desire to be married. Freedom is one of my highest values in life, okay? But you need to understand what freedom means, if anything, in the marriage that you're embarking upon, okay? And like I say, there are things around relocating, you know, traveling, hobbies. What is the alignment, if any, there? Does that even matter to you? We do live in a world whereby the status quo is that a woman gets absorbed into that man's vision and his goals. You know, anytime Michelle Obama, anytime Aisha Curry talk about their own dreams, their own gifts and talents and expressions and what fulfills them, it seemed to be a disrespect, because apparently, you know, when they're married to such wealthy, highly esteemed men who are, by the way, living out their dreams and vision, okay, they get to do the jobs they've always wanted to do. But apparently when you become a wife, well, that's now irrelevant. Why do you think so many women, really, when you saw Emma Grede do her book tour, and there were kind of talking points, of course, which were, I think, strategically golden in order to promote that book. The point is, a lot of women, what really grated their nerves is that Emma Grede was a woman who said, no, 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 no. Okay, I married a man who supports my career and dreams as well. I don't just support his. And the truth is, a lot of women do not marry men who view their career as a priority, who view their career as worthy and worthwhile of them making some changes and sacrifices. So these are the conversations you need to be having, because like I say, the invisible contract is that when you become a wife and a mother, that becomes your highest fulfillment. Yeah, your highest fulfillment and expression should come alive and be born and activated through the man. So he gets to go out and live his dreams and do his dream job. And you're there to help him build his vision. So you need to be having very clear conversations. How does he see you and your gifts and strengths? Because you see, some men seem to think that, if you're allowed as a woman, you've got an allowance and maybe you go off and do some, I don't know, go to the spa, go to Pilates. That's what keeps you ticking along. But you might be a woman who has different interests that may require you to study, interests whereby you do want to progress in your chosen career. You might be creative. I hear a lot of men online. This is why I have to scroll on, because I really don't have much patience for this kind of thing. Men who say, well, I don't want my wife submitting to a boss at work. I don't want my wife to have to ask for time off when I want to spend time with her, when we want to go. And you need to understand how that man sees and views you. Now, of course, if you're a woman who does genuinely believe that your highest fulfillment, that womanhood, quintessential womanhood, is motherhood for you and is being somebody's wife and that's fine. That's your choice. But it's worth having the conversation. Because for a lot of women, they have children, and then maybe when the children go to school, they desire to go back to college. They desire, to pursue a side hustle, or they desire to go back into the workplace. You need to know what his viewpoint is, and ultimately whether he even thinks you're worthy of having any interest beyond him. Because what I see a lot of is people saying you must prioritize the family. When you're a wife, you must prioritize the environment for your children. And they are willing for you to self-abandon, to lose yourself in that process, because it's in pursuit of the family. Meanwhile, he's benefiting. Yeah, he's benefiting. Because actually the family vision just so happens to align with the things that make him feel good and feel alive. So it's very important that you're having these conversations. That is a real power term and condition you should be discussing if you're thinking of going into marriage. Now, the last one is identity and self-determination, and I've kind of alluded to that. Okay, who do you become in this marriage? What dreams survive and which ones you may choose to give away? What ambitions are prioritized? Whose ambitions are prioritized? And when? What parts of yourself have you negotiated away? So this is really about the version of yourself that is required for that marriage to function. Now listen to that carefully. Yeah? What version of you is required for the marriage to function? You need to understand. Only you can answer that. And obviously having conversation with the man that you plan on marrying about this is incredibly important. And it will be very revealing. You see, I know it's not a fun conversation now, is it? It's not a fun conversation to have, especially if these are questions that you feel nervous about asking. And you see, I see a lot of stuff online where it's like, well, you must be soft as a woman, not aggressive, not ask too many questions. He's the leader, let him lead. Okay, well, getting married is an adult decision. You should function psychologically like an adult. You should be of a certain maturity, and wisdom would dictate that you would ask these questions and that they should be key power terms and conditions. Because if you don't ask the questions, the system will tell you what the answers are. Should that marriage need to be dissolved? And actually, while you're in the marriage, when it's not going too well, these things matter. And so it's very important that you focus on the real power, terms, and conditions. So that's my view on marriage, okay? It's a system of power. If you're going to enter it as a woman, you need to be very clear on what the real power, terms, and conditions are. Now, I talk about systems of power, of course, as you know, and the invisible contracts that systems of power create and embed into the nervous system and the psyche of women. Okay, and that govern the decisions that we make on Substack. So I encourage you to go over to Substack if you do enjoy reading long form and subscribe. So until next time, take care.